Hi. I was just putting my chapstick on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday edition of live stream with me, Dr. AJ Jeetagunta, Dr. Aparajita Jeetagunta, AJ, however you know me, Raji. But if you don't know me and you call me that, I will not respond to you, just so you know. So today, I'm still feeling kind of grody, as you can tell, but I didn't want to give up on this opportunity to have this live stream. And I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And my tagline is making the invisible visible for better belongingness. And I am a certified professional executive leadership coach. So given all of that, if you are tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in, whether you are coming in live or whether you are tuning in later. Thank you for coming in to watch this video and to hear my thoughts. I really, really appreciate it. I am an immigrant, so that's really today's topic transcends my American nationality. I don't know why my dogs are barking, but they're always barking in my live stream, so who knows? But today what I wanted to talk about is something that is very salient to me in the intersectionality of my Indian and American existence. Because what is happening around us in society right now, many of the things that are happening, let's just say hashtag 2020. By the way, what is going on with 2020? That no matter who I speak to, I just say, well, 2020 happened. And it's like a whole new level of understanding, right? There's something to be said about that. If you are tuning in, please comment so I know who's here and I can have a conversation with you. But so hashtag 2020, even in spite of that, what's happening is that my American existence and then my Indian ancestral existence are sort of crossing paths, and it's led to a very interesting realization on my part. And that's what I want to talk about today. The ideas of nationalism, patriotism, racism, say what? Because these are very, very deeply intertwined. And it's become very kind of obvious to me that, and again, these are just my thoughts. I'm not prescribing to or asking people to prescribe to any certain types of thoughts. These are just my thoughts based on my lived experiences. What's going on in America right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and with the movement for social justice, for equity, and for fairness. And then something that's been happening in India on the border over the past couple of days. They met pets. They coincided. They clashed, or not clashed, but they came together. In that, so that right now there is a conflict on the border of India and China. This conflict has been going on for many, many, many decades, and even farther than that. Geopolitical disputes. And then we have the ongoing movement for Black Lives Matter, for social justice, for fairness, for reform in America. India also has the Citizens Act happening, where, in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinions, they intentionally excluded Muslims in India for many reasons, and they used various excuses for it. But let's be honest about the exclusion and the discrimination that happened there, no matter what political side you come from. And there's a reason I say that, and that gets to the point of today's topic: nationalism, patriotism, and racism. Yeah, they're all related, because here's the bottom line. These kind of geopoliticals. Hi, Kristen. Sorry, I have to pause. Kristen, I'm so glad Miles just said America and left the room. Yes, Miles. Thank you for joining in, and thank you for chiming in and echoing what I said. Oh my God, kiddo, I love you so much. But thank you, Kristen. What I want to talk about today is I want to start off with like the Indian geopolitical context and bring it into the American context. And I also want to tie in nationalism, patriotism, and racism, right? Because it is perfectly acceptable to be patriotic. It is perfectly acceptable, and it is perfectly understandable and encouraged to root for the team that has given you even the bare minimum limited amount of resources that helped you survive, or at least root for the team that you are currently at least, a part of, even if you want to or not. At the end of the day, that's what not patriotism, sorry, I misspoke. That's what nationalism and racism, that's what the intersection of it is for me. And I know I'm being very cerebral. I'm going to bring it down to a very concrete example in just like a few seconds. My whole point about today's talk is that what I see happening around the world right now are people using what are considered patriotic ideas, what are considered statements that are supposed to be made in support of their nation or in support of their people, and really using it to be very prejudiced, very xenophobic, and extremely racist. And I see this happening in the Indo-Chinese conflict right now, and I see this happening in America right now. And the reason I'm really talking about this today is at 1:30 a.m. last night, and I know I'm going to get flack for about this from my family, but I have to say it. At 1:30 a.m. this morning, I suppose, I actually cut off all contact with several members of my family in a group chat because they generalized what was happening, and they used what I felt, for me, was unacceptable racist rhetoric. I spoke out about it, and I said, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I don't want to be a part of this group anymore. I don't want to be a part of any group that espouses these kind of values or attitudes, or that could translate into behaviors that are discriminatory. And I left. And I already caught a lot of flack for it within my family, because I had several calls today asking me why I left the group. And I stated my reasons, and what I got back was, well, but these are family members. You should talk to them. And yes, I will talk to them on a one-on-one basis. And I will get to the bottom of this. But I will not participate in situations where other principles, where racism, xenophobia, and discriminatory actions are prettily disguised by these other principles of patriotism, nationalism, and pride for one's own people. Because for me, the bottom line is that geopolitical conflicts are going to happen. That is the nature of power dynamics and politics of those who are in the elite positions to do so. That does not give the general populace even an inkling or a shred of I don't know what you want to call it, motivation or initiative to use that to be racist against a whole culture of people or a whole group of people, no matter who these people are. What I mean by that is that, let me use the Indochina example. Yes, India and China are going through some geopolitical issues right now that are far more complicated to unpack than is the scope of just this live stream. Yes, I know the history. Yes, this history was a part of my dissertation, so trust when I say I know the history. I've studied it. I don't want to talk about it here because it's beyond the scope of it, but there has been decades, more than a few decades of conflict happening there. Just like with the Indo-Pak region, just like with in South India, between Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka and Tamil Nadu, and just like with several other regions in the world. Those are geopolitical issues. But as a person, does that make it acceptable for you to demean somebody from that culture or to demean that culture as a whole? Absolutely not. That is xenophobia. That is racism, because you are using these geopolitical issues as an excuse to think that you are somehow superior to another living human being. And that is exactly what is happening in America right now. Let me repeat that. This is also happening all over the world, but we are seeing it happen in America right now in a way that if people don't realize that they are using political issues, they are playing directly into the games of the power dynamics instead of thinking as individual human beings with reason, intellect, and the capacity for logic and the capacity for humanity. This is going to keep happening. Racism from person to person is not acceptable. You generalizing experiences to an entire culture of people and then using that to demean them, to deny them rights, to make them feel less than human is not acceptable. To be complicit in systems that day in and day out devalue Black lives in America is not acceptable, because we are playing into these geopolitical games when we do so. And I wouldn't even have talked about it had this Indo-Chinese example not come up again, and had I not lost connections that I think are actually really deep, valuable connections of love with family members who I absolutely love. I can love them, but I have no problem cutting them out on this, because the truth of the matter is that no person, no race or ethnicity or culture is superior than any others. None. And if we truly believe that, then if you truly believe that, you are superior than an entire culture, that you are superior than other people, no matter who that person is, then you have an ism problem. And you're probably disguising it as being the American thing to do, or being the pro-Indian thing to do, or being the pro-Chinese thing to do, or being the pro-insert whatever culture you're in thing to do. Yeah, and I try not to go on rants on these things, but I always end up going on rants. Like, it's uncanny. I don't even know how to explain this. My bottom line here is that please unpack what your motives are, what your why is. Because what you might think you're doing in the name of patriotism may just be xenophobia. And all that would take to fix that, I'm not saying this is easy. It's going to take work. But all that needs to happen there, if you think you're being patriotic, but you just don't know the history, or you've just never internalized the history, or you've just never absorbed the history of America, the real history of genocide, slavery, colonial attitudes, systemic oppression, especially in light of the trend of Black people suddenly committing suicides by hanging themselves in trees, and so many happening in the course of a week over the country, all over the country, that how is this not reminiscent of lynching episodes in the past? Like, if you are not able to connect the dots and it's because you are missing information, there are several sources to help you get to the information. But the reason I'm doing this live is to really say, no matter what culture you come from, no matter what your ethnicity is, separate the geopolitical from your humanity. As a human being, you can do better. You can see people for their whole humanness. I 100% believe in that. Maybe not 100% of the people, there's always going to be outliers, but for the majority of us, I 100% believe that, which then makes me question, what is it that is getting in the way of you realizing that every other person you speak to, every other person you interact with, every other person you hear about, every other story you see is about a full human being whose lived experiences are valid? And you don't get to generalize about a whole culture based on the stories you hear or in the guise of patriotism, which is not nationalism. I'm not going to get into that. I'm tired. That's about it for me for today. I will be back on Monday. Thank you for tuning in.